Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the Eloqua user group for the first one for 2022. It's great to have you with us. This month we'll be focusing on the data that matters, primarily using our Eloqua Form to help us capture and gather information. So let's have a close look at what we'll be covering. We'll cover some housekeeping and we'll get into it. So as you know, we use Zoom to host and record our webinars, and replays will be available on our website. So you can go to the blog. We'll also send you an email following the webinar so you can access that. If you'd like to ask any questions throughout the webinar, you can use the Zoom Q&A function in order to do that. If you do have a question that's a little bit more private, you don't want everybody else to see it, please feel free to use the chat function as well, directly to myself or to one of my colleagues. So on the line today is myself, Derek Bell, Director of Customer Success and Marketing, and I'm assisted by Jason O'Donnell, our Account Director. We will be able to help with some chat and Q&A as well. So keep him busy, please. Make sure you ask some questions. Okay, so what's on the agenda today? Welcome and introduction, obviously. We'll dive into identifying the data that matters and some tips around prioritizing that data. Then also some form design. So we get to first of all look at some fundamentals and basics of the form, and then we're going to also look at advanced tips for smarter form use. Let me turn my video on so you can see me. Good morning or good afternoon. Tips for more effective lead scoring. So there's definitely a link between the quality of the data that we collect and the impact that can have on a good lead score model. So we'll just give you a few final tips on that one, and then also finally revisit the release 22A information from Eloqua, which is taking place as we speak. Some customers will already be live on that information. So we just wanted to provide you, as we do most months, a little bit of an overview about you and the people who are registered to join us today. So last year we spoke extensively through different surveys during the user group, and also with a few other customers outside of the user group, and trying to identify where is the preferred online location to connect and chat, which social channel, and LinkedIn, as you would imagine, one hand down. So first thing we'd like to do is invite you to follow us on LinkedIn. So feel free to scan the QR code that's on the screen right now with your phone, and we can get that ball rolling. So whether we develop a group or you'll see events linked in there as well, like today's webinar will be captured there as an event. And so we can potentially get some discussion rolling online if that's what you'd like to do. Then attribution. So the other thing we like to share is how did people come to, or what was the most effective channel for us in order to have people register for the webinar today? And you can see Eloqua wins hands down. So the user group is a subscription, and I'm sure you probably run subscriptions yourself. And so as a subscription, we've got I think it's close to 700 or 800 people who are subscribed to the user group globally. And so that remains our most effective channel. But we do pick up other people from our website, also from our blog with past posts from the user group, and a few from LinkedIn as well. So maybe we'll get to grow that LinkedIn environment. SMS, as you know, is a fairly important channel in the B2B space, potentially more as an event reminder type of service, not so much a marketing service. So we always offer SMS as a reminder option for people when they register. And you can see 42% of people this month selected SMS or requested an SMS reminder. And that's pretty average. It sort of fluctuates from 40 to 50% each month with people. And then who's on the webinar today? So we have a range of people on the call with us today. You can see the vast majority of people fall within the marketing manager type of category, a few marketing directors, some individual contributors, and that 7% CEO is actually made up of a couple of CMOs and I think a CMO or CEO or two as well. So a mix, but yeah, marketing manager tends to be the lion's share of people that attend. So in case you missed it, there's that LinkedIn QR code again. So please feel free to scan that and come and follow us on LinkedIn. I'd love to see you there. All right, let's jump in. So identifying the data that matters and some tips to help you prioritize that data. So there are all sorts of reasons as to why you want to do this. We certainly appreciate from a first data first-party data point of view, that is becoming far more important that we focus on this and look at the quality of the data that we have within our own organizations. So what we'd like to do is walk you through some ideas and tips. So why is the data important? Well, the quality of the data is critical. And it's interesting, if you read some articles, certainly from McKinsey and others, most people seem to have the highest level of confidence around quality of their first-party data versus second and third, et cetera, and so on and so forth. The first-party data is the one that you have the greatest amount of control over, and it's the one that generally feeds in from your CRM platform or potentially from an ERP system with your billing information, those sorts of things. And so that first-party data typically is the one that people have most confidence on. Now, if you don't have confidence around that data, that's something that you need to work on. And there are all sorts of strategies you can employ to help with that. And there are certainly some things Eloqua can do to help you clean that data and scrub that data as well. But once we try and identify the data that does actually matter, that gives us at least a point of focus. So what is the most important data for you? So as I say here, really, it's going to differ for every organization. So whether you're in higher, maybe you're at universities, colleges, maybe you're in wealth management, maybe you're a tech company. There could be a whole suite of different industries. And for everybody, the answer to the question is going to be a little bit different. Perhaps a caveat or a way or a filter to apply would be if a net new lead comes into the marketing system, into Eloqua, for example, and I need to pass that on to the sales team via the CRM, what is the minimum amount of information that the sales team are going to expect before they can actually make an outbound call or actually reach out to that particular individual? Maybe that's a starting point for the data that matters for your organization. Have a think about that one. In a bit more detail, that might help you answer the question. So to give you an idea or some examples, we thought about our customers from 4 different verticals, looking at universities and colleges, potentially also looking at wealth management. And what we've done here is list perhaps what is the data that matters, and maybe this is it. So for universities and colleges, things like date of birth, high school graduation, career interests, maybe even cultural background or their highest level of current education, perhaps if it's a mature student that's coming into the university or college. Legal services, maybe it's in-house counsel versus having external counsel. Industry, some law firms may have specific strengths in particular industries, and so they want to try and identify their sweet spot. If you're a technology provider, maybe it's all about the number of users and, again, the industry. And then maybe we start to move into some softer questions like current limitations, where you might provide people with a single select pick list to provide some responses. So it gives you a little bit more idea about the pain points. But that, again, may be the data that matters for your organization, depending. So just some examples for you to think about. So how do we obtain that information? How do we get that information into our systems? Well, forms from an Eloqua point of view are probably the most likely way that you'll capture that particular data. But the key here is we can very easily fall into a trap of simply asking the same questions again and again. And if we do that, we're really missing an opportunity to grow our first-party data. So if you're familiar with progressive profiling on your Eloqua Forms, that's certainly a powerful way to take a form from being just a reasonably static email, first name, last name, job title, company name, for instance, and actually adding in a whole range of other questions, but still keeping that form at a sensible number of questions when the person actually arrives at that particular form. So don't forget progressive profiling. So that can make things a lot easier for you. Now you combine that with your templates, then you don't even have to think about it. And the most effective use I've ever seen of progressive profiling is from organizations where they include that progressive profiling in templates. If it's not in templates, then people just kind of forget to do it. Think about the data that matters, think about those important questions that you want to ask, and that's a great solution to drop into your progressive profiling and to build into your form templates. It'll make that process a lot easier and a lot more effective for you. So let's look at some fundamentals of the form design editor. Now, this is a little 101, so I'm not sure where you are in relation to your use of Eloqua Forms, but bear with me for a few minutes and we'll jump from here to advanced. So really, as I said before, the form is really the most likely way that you're going to use, the primary method that you're going to use in order to get data into the system. Now, obviously, your CRM will play a role as well, depending on the amount of information that you capture there, and that information will be helpful and hopefully reliable based on your CRM users and the quality of the data that they input. But instead of just simply asking for first name, last name, email address, and industry, we can expand on that. And Forms gives us a great way to do that. I love this quote from an American author, Lisa Lutz. So she says, "Our ability to adapt is amazing. Our ability to change isn't quite as spectacular." I kind of laughed when I read that. I thought it was kind of poignant. I say that in the context of our use of forms. So literally yesterday, I had an email from a customer saying, "Oh, Derek, I've taken this form from last year, just done a save as, and I'm getting these error messages." So I had a look at the screenshot that she sent me in relation to the error messages, and all of the error messages related to modifications she'd made on the form. And I was thinking to myself, why didn't you just use a template instead of doing a save as from last year? So, and let's modify the form. Let's enhance the questions. Let's be smarter about what we're doing. So I have to go back to her today and give her a hand with that. So where are forms used? So here are 4 locations that you would generally use forms. On the Eloqua landing page is probably the #1 location. You probably also use forms on your CMS or website as well. So we call that reposting. So we look at your, for example, the contact us form is probably the most likely candidate on your CMS. We take any form submissions from there and we send those directly into Eloqua. A great way, elegant solution, really simple, enables you to do all sorts of things, send that person a confirmation email. Obviously, they're in Eloqua. They can then be automatically moved into the CRM platform as well. We can drop them into nurture campaigns. If we're really smart, we can look at the type of inquiry, and based on the type of inquiry, route that person in all sorts of different directions. So yeah, from the CMS to Eloqua and to your CRM platform is the nirvana state. Then we have things called blind forms. Blind form is basically the form that the person never sees. So they might go from an email where you ask a question yes or no, and you have a big red button for no and a big green button for yes. They click on yes, and the next thing they see is a confirmation page saying, "Thank you very much for letting us know yes," etc. But on the way through, Eloqua is actually submitting a form on their behalf. And so that's why we call it a blind form. So that can be quite helpful for a range of different things, especially when you've got very binary type of questions, but it doesn't have to be binary. It can be multiple questions. You just have a form for each, and all of that information can be captured via a blind form submission. The other location for form submissions would be on the campaign canvas. So you can take a campaign canvas, routing a person through, and then based on different responses, you can push them through an element called form submit. If you don't have that element, I believe from memory, it's actually an app. It's an Oracle app built by the Oracle Marketing Cloud app team. So it's free. You can add it. And you can have multiple applications for that one. But the other filter and thing to always consider when it comes to your forms is always think about the mobile experience. I always make sure as I producing landing pages and other things, but I have my mobile phone in front of me, and I'm just having a double check and looking at what that form experience is like. It is beautiful, by the way, out of the box. There's not much you need to do to improve it. It works really nicely. So, and that's across all platforms. So you should feel very comfortable with the mobile experience that Eloqua can deliver for you. So some key tips for Eloqua Forms. My #1 tip to you to get the most effective use out of your forms is to create templates, and make sure those templates are configured in such a way that they're generic enough. Don't take a form that worked really well and just simply save it as a template. Go in and alter the text and remove specific information so that it becomes a real template and not just simply something people will forget to change the specific date information, etc. Those sorts of things. Make it a real template. It will save you time, and it's a far more effective use of your time. that don't save as a past form. Back to the experience I shared with you yesterday about the email I got from a customer, exactly the same thing. You might think it's saving you time, but honestly, by the time you figure out what's going on, and the key problem is you will typically want to adjust fields. And when you do that, if you've got dependencies linked to those in the form processing steps, that's when you get error messages. And it kind of becomes like a big brick wall. You can't progress until you rectify them. If you don't understand what the error message is telling you, then you just get frustrated and annoyed. Whereas if you had potentially just started from a template, life would be a lot easier. So think about that one. And then progressive profiling. So don't be afraid of progressive profiling. It's not an overly complex piece of technology. It's super smart in what it does. But from your point of view to configure it, it's very simple. But it comes back to the idea of knowing what is the data that matters, what is most important to us as a business. That's the best example. So I say go hard and go early with progressive profiling and use it as often as possible. And then finally, from a fundamentals point of view, just to recap for you, the types of fields that are available within the form. There's quite a range of those available. You've got single line text, paragraph text, single pick list, single checkboxes. All of this information is available in the Help Center too, by the way. And of course, it's right in front of you there in Eloqua. Form text is just a way that you can add like some headings and sections to your form. If you wanted to break it out a little bit with some descriptions, you can do that. Multiple pick lists, radio buttons, checkboxes, and hidden fields. So hidden fields are tremendously helpful because they assist you from point of view of adding things like campaign IDs from the CRM. You can also use field mergers in those to add information that you may already know about the person, which can help you drive some form processing steps as well. So lots of use for hidden fields. Think of attribution, lead source, all that sort of stuff. Using query strings, you can drop information into those to help you with your attribution modeling and reporting. So let's take a quick look at forms and just recap on some of those points. So here's a form that we use, and it's one from our website. So it's a subscription. So this is our website. And from the website, you'll see we've got the user group listed there. And if people click on the nice big red button, subscribe now, they're brought to a landing page which hosts this particular form. And so you can see here, email address, technically speaking, email address is the only required field that you must have on a form. You can actually put a form up with just email address, and that's absolutely fine. It will function. But it's generally not going to help you a great deal because you're not getting any more information. Now, you'll see this next section here is actually all progressive profiling. So what we're trying to achieve here is a result that if we have a known individual who comes to our website and decides to subscribe, when they reach that form, all they will see is work email address. And if in fact all of these questions are populated, first name, last name, organization name, and at least one of the following. So you see here, I've got fields to display is 4. I'm not randomizing them because I want to certainly, if I don't know the person, I certainly want to make sure we get first name, last name, organization name, and then potentially their marketing automation platform. But if I know all of that already, Eloqua is then going to look at choosing from these options below. And then we have a couple of others which are mandatory, which we ask all the time anyway. But then below that, these become hidden fields all the way down. So these are all hidden fields doing all sorts of different things. You can see the lead source and attribution information, and they're all field mergers, pulling information in that if we know information, it will pull it in. If we don't know information, those field mergers have defaults associated to them as well. So they'll fill in the rest of the gaps for us. Your processing steps, an important part of any form. And keeping in mind with processing steps is a whole swag of things that you can do. Updating contacts, updating custom data objects, sending an email to the person who has submitted the form, for example. You've got notification emails that can be triggered to internal stakeholders. In this case, we send one to the salesperson who owns the relationship. We do CRM updates using programs, and then redirecting to confirmation pages. So your form helps you manage that whole process. Keeping in mind as you build out your form, you can only add contact fields. So the ability to update an account field can be done through processing steps, but you need to be very careful with that one, because certainly from a best practice point of view, Eloqua is typically not the source of truth when it comes to account information. Account information typically belongs to your CRM platform or your ERP system. So just think that one through carefully before you start modifying too much at an account level. And then here are all those form elements that I just shared with you from that slide deck. So your single line text form, single pick lists, etc. And you can see we've got a range of those that have been used over here as well. Field validation, if you need to make the field required, you can tick the box. You can have pre-population of either a static value or a field merge. So a static value would be here. For instance, we've selected a website subscription events as a lead source, versus others here, which you can see are field merges. So there's a whole range of functions that you've got available to you there. One of the fun ones is obviously looking at the submission data, and that's trying to work out who's actually filled in that particular form. And so then all your details are captured like so. And you can export that information out to Excel if you need to at any point. So that's a little bit of a crash course in forms and some of the fundamentals. If you need a hand with any of the information that we shared there or want to learn more, you can contact our support team at support@marketingcube.com.au. You can either send them an email, or again, you could simply scan that QR code on your screen and we can go from there. But let's dive in and have a closer look at some slightly more advanced uses of forms and looking at it from a first-party data point of view. So the more complex we get, there's so much that we can do, and there are so many types of examples where forms can be used. And we can follow the trap of just kind of keep doing what we've always done. But you'd be surprised, some of the examples of forms that we've seen over the years that customers have created, or they've required some assistance from us to create it for them, have been quite extraordinary. So they can be from things like quizzes. So at the end of the day, an Eloqua form is simply a way to present people with a field that they enter a value in, and then you progress through. So natively within Eloqua, that means it's usually on screen, maybe 5 or 6 different fields with a submit button at the bottom. But with a little bit of HTML magic and maybe some JavaScript added to assist, there are a whole range of possibilities that begin to open up as to how you can actually use forms. So maybe it's a short, quick poll, for instance. That can be something that you often see in the bottom of an email, people trying to, or marketers trying to evaluate the effectiveness of content. And they may be asking for sort of a thumbs up, thumbs down, or was this content helpful, yes or no? That can be a very simple way to capture that information. And that could also be seen as a blind form submission as well. Or you may bring a person to a page where you ask for more feedback if they say no. For example, what specifically was it that didn't quite work for them? That could be one way to do it. Adaptive forms, so where questions will change based on past responses. If you think of your SurveyMonkey type scenario, you'll know that within Eloqua that natively we can't do that, but we can certainly do it based on a little bit of HTML. So if you think about maybe post-event surveys, if you have a standard post-event survey that you like to run and you want that to be a little bit more intelligent than just simply maybe 2 or 3 questions, then that's certainly something that you could do. Calculators is another great one. So typically an ROI calculator, for example. We had a client in the financial services space who enabled, I'm trying to remember the scenario, they basically enabled their channel partners to use this calculator to calculate a rebate, I think it was. They could put in a scenario of possible sales figures, for instance, and then the calculator would return to them the rebate that they would achieve if they sold X amount by X date, for example. It's just a form at the end of the day. Now, of course, it's an intelligent form, and there's a little bit of magic done in the back end to make that work. But the other nice thing about it is that people would often put in scenarios. That was the whole point. The channel partner could come to this ROI calculator or whatever it was, pop in the different scenarios, and every single time that form was submitted, that data was captured, which became really helpful and quite interesting to the marketing team and the business as a whole to look at those different scenarios. So there can be all sorts of really interesting reasons as to why something like that could be a great idea. Now, of course, event registration is the key one for many of us using Eloqua, and we can be as simple or as complex as we need those forms to be. Gated thought leadership is obviously another big one. And then preference centers and also subscriptions. Now, you may use those terms interchangeably. It's the same thing, but they can in fact be two quite different things. But at the end of the day, it's still a form that you're using. If you go back to our eval that you would have got about an hour or so ago, or a bit longer now, an hour and a half ago, at the bottom of that email in the footer, you'll see manage my preferences as a hyperlink. If you click on that, that will take you to our preference center, which is in fact a single form that is presented to you over 3 screens. The first screen just confirms your information. The next one offers subscriptions. And then the third one presents you with some preferences that you may want to share. So if you put your Eloqua eyes on, when you look at that, what you're actually seeing is a single form that is represented across those 3 pages. So yes, a little bit of HTML magic involved in order to deliver that. But have a look at that. This is one example of certainly a slightly more complex use of Eloqua Forms. Okay, so when is required? Required. So it's very easy to create a form and just go required, 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 and all of a sudden you're sort of at 8 or 9 questions and every single thing is required. There was some research done a number of years ago by Oracle. It was actually Eloqua, I think, even, so it's quite a few years ago now, where essentially the sweet spot for effective form submissions was around 7 fields. And what they've done, obviously, because they can see all the form submissions across all clients using Eloqua, it's quite easy for them to work out which one's the most effective and then narrow it down, and 7 seem to be the sweet spot. So the nice thing from an Eloqua point of view, if your audience are reaching an Eloqua form on an Eloqua landing page, you'll have pre-population at play. You'll have progressive profiling potentially at play as well. So while there may be 7 fields, there's every chance that 3, 4, or 5 of those fields will actually pre-populate. So from a form abandonment point of view, that hopefully reduces the chance of form abandonment. But if we're essentially conveying the value well of what we're offering and why we're asking for this information, hopefully then the barrier of a form won't in fact become a brick wall. That people will see that particular form, yep, that's fine, I'm comfortable answering those questions, etc., and we'll push it through. We certainly find that free text fields they're a little bit more cumbersome and people have to think a little bit more about a free text field. Obviously, first name, last name, and email address need to be free text fields. But where possible, try and present people with single select pick lists, for example, or radio buttons or something like that where they don't have to actually type in the scenario. Also think through what that experience is like on a mobile device. But sometimes you'll find that you don't have to make everything required. One quick scenario for you. We have a client here in the Australian market, global brand, but in the Australian market, they do domestic real estate. And they had a lead capture form on a third-party website, a real estate website, that required X amount of things, and mobile phone was a required field. What they found was people were just looking and interested, but they wanted to get the information, and so they had to submit the form. And so in order to submit the form, they would put a phone number in of 555, 555, 555, obviously completely useless. So the data quality was pretty bad at the end of the day. So they came across a stroke of genius and said to that third-party business, guys, when you put that form up, can we make a mobile phone not required, please? So, sure, no worries. So yes, of course, as you would imagine, they got a number of form submissions where there was no mobile phone. But of the people that did put in their mobile phone, it was no longer 555, 555. It was actually a real phone number. Then to make it a little bit more intelligent, as those leads came into Eloqua and the information was then sent to the person that they had requested, Eloqua was able to identify that there was no mobile phone number. And so in the email that went out, it went out from the specific account owner that owned that real estate property, and saying, look, here's the information you've asked for. Hopefully it's helpful. Look, it would be a lot easier to probably walk you through what we're doing by phone, or you could drop in and see me. Here's my phone number. Here's my contact details. Please feel free to provide yours. You can either click on this form and provide me with your telephone number and I can give you a call, or we can schedule a time, etc. And then they found there was also a pickup there. So that process would enable them to get better quality phone numbers. So sometimes making everything required is not necessarily the right answer. And if there's a little bit of a journey, and that journey that I'm talking about there, that's a high value purchase. We're talking, $1 million plus for the sort of real estate that they were selling. So while it's a consumer purchase, it's certainly a very high value and considered purchase. So I give you that to you just simply as an example, and one that seemed to work really well for that particular customer. So what I've done here is focus on some Australian organisations. The first one is actually the Prime Minister of Australia, who your president, or the US president, can't seem to remember his name, and I think most Australians feel much the same way. But you'll notice that they have just about everything required. They want to know everything about you before you contact the Prime Minister. Perhaps that's a security thing, I've got no idea. The next one along is a large Australian university. And so this is a future student inquiry form, as it says there at the top. So this is very much a net new sort of marketing lead type of form. So again, there's quite a few required fields there. And even the ask a question is required. I'm not sure if you noticed that. You can see it right there at the very bottom. Then Marketing Cube, that's us. So there are a few things that we have as required, but we sort of took a little bit of a lesson there, you might notice, from our friends at the real estate company, where the person's reaching this page, email may be their preference, but whatever works for them, really. If they want to provide a mobile phone number, fantastic, we will give them a call. If they'd rather just leave their email address and submit their inquiry, that's totally fine too. So we sort of leave that up to the person to choose what they'd like to do. And then the last one is actually one of the Australian banks. I was a little bit disappointed with that mobile experience on that page. But again, quite a lot of information available or required there. But notice the email address is not required, which I thought was strange in sort of 2022. So I can tell you, out of those 4 examples in front of you, 2 of them are Eloqua users, and I'm sure you can figure out we are. And I'll leave you to try and figure out the others if you like. But purely just some examples. So here we're looking, one is public administration, and the other is higher education and universities and colleges. Marketing Cube, agency, I suppose you would drop us into a category of, and then kind of banking and finance, so across different industries. I'd encourage you to do the same thing. Think about your competitors. Go and have a look and see what they're doing. If they're only asking 2 or 3 questions and you're asking 5 or 6 questions, could that be impacting things? Could you think about maybe optimizing those forms a little bit and working through them? So encourage you to go about that and have a look. So better lead capture and lead management, certainly forms play a really good part in this exercise. And so if you're thinking about ad campaigns that you're running, you certainly will find a great experience by sending those people from your Google ads or your LinkedIn ads or your Facebook ads or wherever you're advertising online, or even billboards with big QR codes, whatever they might be, direct those people to an Eloqua form, preferably on an Eloqua landing page. So then you can really take advantage of the pre-population and progressive profiling and those sorts of things. It'll also help you from an attribution point of view to really see how effective the ad campaign was. And you can use the campaign IDs as well to make sure you're linking that information and connecting it through into your CRM platform as well. So another one would be targeted subscription forms. So I showed you earlier, we'll show you here again just quickly, the the use of specific subscriptions. You may or may not be using email groups within your organization to do that. If you're not, I'd encourage you to have a think about it. It really works well. So the Eloqua user group is a subscription as far as Marketing Cube is concerned, and is in fact its own email group contained within our platform. And so that just gives us a lot of flexibility and control at the same time over managing the people that are subscribed or, unfortunately, at some point unsubscribed from the email group. And so we can control and deliver a richer experience from that point of view. So let me just show you that again. So as I said, we drive people to, so this is a shot from our website, our CMS. Call to action is to subscribe now. And then people are sent here to this particular page where we ask them a few questions, explain what the subscription is all about, how often they'll hear from us, what type of events we host, etc., and get them subscribed. This also becomes really helpful because while this is an always-on type of landing page and form that's really designed to go from our website, these are also helpful then in other campaigns. So when we run other campaigns, we have some content blocks that are sort of pre-designed that we drop into some emails from time to time that will encourage people to subscribe to the user group, subscribe to our important Eloqua updates, subscribe to Outside the Cube. There can be a whole range of different subscriptions that we present. So that becomes a really smart use of forms, and all with the objective of building first-party data, getting more first-party data and better quality first-party data. So don't forget, an important part about forms and all that data capture sort of sits from an analytics point of view within Insight. So there are a number of reports available within Insight to help you. Your form processing steps from an advanced point of view are critical. I always explain, well, for me, when I do training, I explain to people the form is probably the least sexy part of the platform. It's not pretty. I mean, it's got some nice colors, okay, but it's an incredibly powerful part of the platform, and it can do so much. And so much of when we talk about marketing automation, yes, we have the campaign canvas, but the form processing steps are a really critical part of that process as well. And the better you can understand those, the more you'll get out of them. Also, don't forget the dashboards. So within Eloqua itself, you've got the dashboards, which are quite helpful with more information. Alrighty, let's jump in and have a look at lead scoring. This really, as I said, we were kind of planning out the topic, etc., going through the bullet points, and it just was like, well, hang on a minute, we really need to just mention this, and it literally is a slide, I think. It's a single slide with a few key points. So our observation over the years when we help people from a lead score model point of view, so we run a number of workshops to help people build out their lead score models, and it's a lot of fun. But what it does uncover pretty quickly is sometimes the lack of data. So the customer will get excited, well, absolutely we need to know this, and absolutely we need to know that. Absolutely, yes, let's make sure they're in the lead score model. Okay, that's great. We then go into Eloqua and have a look, and we see that those corresponding fields that apparently were so important are almost empty, or the quality of the data contained in the fields is really bad. Or there are duplicate fields that in fact are the same thing, but someone somewhere has created a second field, or maybe even a third field, which is in fact the same thing. So that quality of the data is super critical. And if you think about the role of like a data steward type of role, somebody who has sort of organization-wide responsibility for making sure data is consistent across all of your different platforms, that sort of person would be a really good person to have in the room. We also find one of the key outcomes of the lead score model process is the alignment between marketing and sales is enhanced, and certainly the service team as well, if they play a role there, which quite often they do. So a robust model, as we said there, will definitely uncover some gaps in your data, and specifically in the quality of your data. So an audit is always a really good idea, but it will kind of naturally come out of a lead scoring workshop scenario. So we'll leave that to you just as by way of feedback and some interest. All right, let's jump in and have a look at the Release 22A. So for most of you on pod 1, this ship has already sailed and you're already on board. If you'd like to get some specific breakdown in a bit more detail than what we'll go through today, please go ahead and use the QR code there on the screen. Just use your smartphone to scan that one, and you can subscribe to our important updates, which will be out next week. And we just sort of dive in to some of the key points that have been functions that have been released, and just expand on those in a little bit more detail for you. So lucky to get 1 or 2 emails a quarter with that one, so we certainly won't be inundating you. So here are the dates. We find most of the North American clients are on pod 1. We're also on pod 1. It does depend on maybe how long you've been with Oracle. Pods 3 and 4. Now, these are Australian Eastern Daylight Time, so these happened for you on the Friday, slightly before. But yeah, as we said, pod 1 has already gone live. Pod 1 and 2 actually already on the new release. So what's on that schedule? Let's have a look. So split decision on the campaign canvas. We'll show you these here in just a moment as well. Also the intelligent form spam prevention. Some of you may have had early access to that. That's now generally available, which is great. There's also been some updates in responses to the Apple Mail privacy changes. What you'll see there is enhanced reporting in Insight, which we won't cover off today, but if you jump into Insight, you will start to see some changes there. The blind form submit URL shortening. So essentially what we're doing there is masking personally identifiable information, or PII information. That's something you need to log a service request with Oracle for to turn on, and we would encourage you to certainly do that. It's certainly a good thing. If you're using Zoom, unfortunately, the only update is that there is no progress of the new app. Apparently, the legal eagles have taken over and are having a discussion. It's the only advice we've received. So once Oracle and Zoom work out what they're doing, we'll get an updated app for Zoom. And also SMS enhancements. So the SMS functionality, which is now native to Eloqua, but is an add-on for the platform, has been enhanced, and you'll find more details about that as well. But I just wanted to jump in and show you a couple of those things from the update. First one was the audience split. So the audience split is in fact an action, as you can see here. And it's essentially, it's really simple. It's really just a sliding scale. You choose the yes and no parameters in relation to which direction people go. And this is just a really basic example. I was thinking of an application. So you'll have a single segment. You might have multiple segments, but in this case, a single segment dropping into your audience split, where you then may want to delay a percentage of people from receiving an email. So sliding scale. So in this example, 46% of people would head down the no track and receive the email, and the 54% will go down the yes path, and they'll wait for X amount of time. Now, this is not an A/B testing solution, but it will make life a little bit easier for those who are wanting to do some A/B testing sort of within the campaign canvas. As you know, we can't send the winning email to people automatically from the canvas. We need to use the simple email campaign in order to do that. But yeah, so something to think about, and we'll try and come up with some other examples of usage as clients start to play with it. I find as soon as they start playing with it, they find applications for it. So that can be quite helpful. All right. Then over on the form, what you'll notice, and you may or may not have noticed it already, here under your general settings area is a spam protection button that you must turn on. Now, if you're placing, and it's not on by default, by the way, so if you're placing an Eloqua form directly onto an Eloqua landing page, you're good to go. It's fine. Please go ahead and turn them on. They will work beautifully. However, if you're taking an Eloqua form and you're reposting it from your website, so think again of your Contact Us form, which is hosted by the CMS, and you've got your Eloqua code sitting behind it, that's a reposting of that data into Eloqua. There are some updates that are needed and changes made to the HTML that's doing that. So please don't just come in here and merrily turn the spam protection on for all of your forms. If it is a reposting form, you will certainly need to have a chat to your Eloqua administrator and maybe your development team, or of course the team at Marketing Cube would be more than happy to assist you with any of those changes. But yeah, just be mindful of that one. But as I said, if it's an Eloqua form going onto an Eloqua landing page, turn it on. Turn it on. It's going to hopefully help. Hopefully you've not been hit or had issues from spam submissions, but if you have, this potentially will be your new best friend. Were there any questions through any of that process or any of those different points that we had covered? We'd love to hear from you if there are. If you'd like to join us next month, what we'll be doing next month is taking you through working with the data that matters. So today has been about identifying that data and looking at ways to capture that data and bring that data into Eloqua to enrich our first-party data. Next month, what we'd like to do is look at working with that first-party data and looking at ways to enhance dynamic content, looking at ways to build smarter segments, etc., and more. So again, you can scan the QR code if you like, or you can wait to receive an invitation from us, which you will certainly receive, and we can get the party started. Again, if there are any questions, please feel free to drop those into the Q&A. It doesn't look like Jason's been so busy. All right, guys. Well, look, if there aren't any questions, we might give you a slight early mark, or 10 minutes early, which is fine. So I'm sure you won't mind. Time to go and grab a coffee or head home a little bit earlier. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks very much, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.